Ancient America's Forgotten Metropolis. Imagine a city larger than London in 1250, with 40,000 residents, sophisticated urban planning, and massive earthen pyramids. Now imagine that city wasn't in Europe, Egypt, or Asia, but in what is now Illinois, United States. What if America's largest ancient city was deliberately erased from history? While European medieval castles are celebrated in classrooms across the country, this Native American metropolis remains virtually unknown despite rivaling European cities in scale and sophistication. Cahokia stands as a testament to indigenous ingenuity, yet it's missing from most history textbooks. Today, we uncover this forgotten civilization and explore why such an important chapter of American history has been systematically excluded from our educational narrative. The hidden metropolis of Cahokia. Just across the Mississippi River from modern-day St. Louis lies a landscape that once held America's first true metropolis. If you visit this unassuming area in Collinsville, Illinois today, you might see mounds rising from the earth, but little to suggest that 1,000 years ago, this was the site of Cahokia, a pre-Columbian city whose sophistication challenges everything we thought we knew about early North American societies. Established around 700 CE, Cahokia gradually evolved from a collection of small settlements into something extraordinary. By 1050 CE, it had transformed into an urban center that sprawled across 6 square miles of the Mississippi floodplain. What makes this particularly remarkable is that during this same period, most European settlements were significantly smaller. While Paris and London were growing, they remained compact cities confined by defensive walls. Cahokia, meanwhile, spread across the landscape in a carefully organized pattern that reflected sophisticated urban planning concepts. Archaeological excavations have revealed that Cahokia was meticulously designed. The city followed a planned layout with distinct zones for different purposes, similar to how modern urban planners create designated commercial, residential, and recreational districts. Residential neighborhoods housed the tens of thousands of inhabitants in structures arranged in organized patterns. These homes surrounded larger communal plazas and ceremonial spaces, creating a city with clear functional areas. Unlike the chaotic growth of many medieval European cities, Cahokia demonstrated intentional design principles. Perhaps most impressive was Cahokia's adherence to precise astronomical alignments. The entire city was constructed on a grid system aligned to the cardinal directions, with major structures positioned in relation to solar events like solstices and equinoxes. This alignment reflected deep astronomical knowledge and engineering precision. The Cahokians built their city to embody their cosmological understanding, creating a physical manifestation of their worldview. At the heart of Cahokia lay the Grand Plaza, a vast open space covering 50 acres that served as the community's central gathering point. Excavations show the Grand Plaza was carefully engineered. Cahokian builders actually scraped away topsoil and filled low-lying areas to create a level surface with a slight downward slope for drainage. This massive public works project could accommodate thousands of people for ceremonies, games, markets, and political gatherings. The plaza was surrounded by important structures and mounds, emphasizing its central role in Cahokian society and governance. One particularly stunning artifact found at Cahokia, a small clay figurine of a woman kneeling with a shell-shaped hoe, her hair woven into an intricate pattern, speaks volumes about the city's cultural sophistication and connection to distant regions. The materials found at Cahokia reveal a city at the center of extensive trade networks. Archaeologists have uncovered items made from copper from the Great Lakes region, shells from the Gulf Coast, and various specialized materials from throughout the Mississippi Valley. Trade materials appear throughout different residential areas, suggesting widespread participation in these networks. Cahokia served as the hub of a complex economic system that connected diverse regions across eastern North America. What makes Cahokia's story particularly fascinating is how thoroughly it disappeared from our collective memory. Despite being the largest pre-Columbian settlement north of Mexico, Cahokia remains virtually unknown to most Americans. When schoolchildren learn about North American history, they rarely hear about this sophisticated city that predated European arrival by centuries. The question becomes what happened to Cahokia itself, and how such an important chapter in American history could be so comprehensively forgotten. The archaeological evidence contradicts the persistent narrative that sophisticated urban centers didn't exist in North America before European contact. At its height between 1050 to 1150 CE, Cahokia was home to approximately 40,000 people, a population that exceeded London during the same period. This was a genuine metropolis by global measures of the time. To support this population, Cahokia required sophisticated infrastructure. The city featured carefully designed neighborhoods with different housing styles reflecting various social classes. Archaeological evidence shows specialized craft production areas where residents created pottery, stone tools, copper ornaments, and other goods. The city also developed extensive food storage systems, including large underground pits that helped manage the agricultural surplus needed to feed its dense population. Cahokia's city planning extended beyond buildings to include extensive hydrological engineering. Excavations have revealed sophisticated drainage systems, artificial ponds, and evidence of water management practices. The Cahokians modified the natural landscape, diverting small streams and creating water features that served both practical and ceremonial purposes. This level of environmental engineering demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of landscape management and hydraulics. The social organization necessary to build and maintain such a complex urban center speaks to Cahokia's political sophistication. The coordination required to construct massive public works, maintain trade networks, and organize food distribution systems suggests a highly structured socio-political system. Leaders had to command significant authority to mobilize the labor and resources needed for projects like the Grand Plaza and the numerous mounds throughout the city. How could such an advanced civilization simply vanish from our historical consciousness? Part of the answer lies in the timing of Cahokia's decline. By the time European chroniclers arrived in the region in the 16th and 17th centuries, Cahokia had been abandoned for 2 centuries. With no written records from the Cahokians themselves, their story wasn't captured in the historical documents that formed the basis of early American history. What remained were the mounds and artifacts, silent testimony to their achievements. The erasure of Cahokia from mainstream historical narratives aligns with centuries of minimizing indigenous achievements to reinforce colonial narratives. By portraying pre-contact North America as sparsely populated and technologically primitive, European colonizers could justify their claims to the continent as unused land. Recognizing that North America was home to sophisticated urban centers like Cahokia fundamentally challenges these justifications. Modern archaeological techniques continue to reveal new details about Cahokia's sophistication. Magnetometry surveys and other non-invasive methods have mapped previously unknown structures beneath the soil. Isotope analysis of human remains provides insights into diet and migration patterns, revealing the diverse origins of Cahokia's residents. These findings continue to enhance our understanding of this remarkable civilization. Monks Mound, America's forgotten pyramid. Rising from the heart of ancient Cahokia stands what archaeologists call Monks Mound, a structure so enormous that it contains more soil than Egypt's Great Pyramid of Khufu. Despite its massive scale, this remarkable feat of engineering remains conspicuously absent from lists of ancient wonders, raising uncomfortable questions about which civilization's achievements we choose to celebrate and remember. The statistics of Monks Mound reveal its commanding presence, covering 14 acres at its base, equivalent to 10.5 football fields, and rising 100 feet through 4 distinct terraced levels. Its dimensions stretch approximately 1,000 feet long by 800 feet wide, requiring an estimated 22 million cubic feet of earth to construct. Standing atop the summit at dusk, a visitor would witness the city spreading below like a tapestry, residential neighborhoods, the Grand Plaza to the south, and farmlands beyond, all bathed in golden light as the sun's final rays cast long shadows across the Mississippi floodplain. What makes this achievement remarkable is that the builders worked without tools typically associated with monumental construction. They had no metal implements, no wheels or carts, and no draft animals. Every basket of soil was dug by hand using stone, bone, or wooden tools, carried on human backs, and precisely placed according to a comprehensive architectural plan, representing over 14 million person-hours of labor. Archaeological excavations have revealed sophisticated engineering knowledge throughout the structure. The builders created distinct layers of differing soil types, alternating between coarse and fine materials to create a natural drainage system. They incorporated specialized materials like sand and clay in strategic areas to manage moisture and prevent structural failure. Particularly impressive are the filter layers built into the mound, special strata of sand and gravel that allow water to drain through without carrying away structural soil. This technology demonstrates an advanced understanding of hydrology and soil mechanics that preserved the structure through centuries. Without these carefully engineered features, a monument of this size would have collapsed under its own weight and the erosive forces of rainfall. Carbon dating has revealed that Monks Mound represents at least 10 major construction phases spanning several centuries, a multi-generational project requiring exceptional social organization and cultural continuity. The final form featured 4 distinct terraces rising to the summit platform that covers about an acre and a half. This platform once supported a massive wooden building approximately 105 feet long, 48 feet wide, and 50 feet high, essentially a wooden skyscraper atop an already towering mound. Archaeological evidence suggests this structure served as a temple or residence for Cahokia's paramount chief, combining religious and political significance. The strategic positioning of Monks Mound within the Cahokian landscape demonstrates intentional design. Located at the center of the city's north-south axis, the monument's elevation made it visible from miles away across the floodplain. Anyone approaching would have seen this imposing structure dominating the horizon, a clear statement of power and authority. From the summit, Cahokian leaders could survey their entire domain, their elevated position reinforcing social hierarchies through the built environment. The mound's precise alignment reflects careful planning. Its sides are oriented to the cardinal directions, with its longest axis running almost exactly north-south. This cardinal alignment appears throughout Cahokian architecture, linking the built environment to cosmic principles. The western side forms a perfect north-south line, suggesting it may have served as a monumental gnomon, essentially a giant sundial tracking time and seasons. The construction also demonstrates remarkable resource management. Archaeological evidence shows the Cahokians created burrow pits, large excavations surrounding the city where soil was removed for mound construction. These pits were later repurposed as artificial ponds and wetlands, serving both practical and aesthetic purposes, a sustainable approach where construction material extraction zones became valuable features of the urban landscape. Despite the evidence of engineering brilliance, careful planning, and monumental scale, Monks Mound rarely appears alongside other ancient wonders in popular discussions of human achievement. While structures like the Egyptian pyramids, Roman Colosseum, or Machu Picchu are instantly recognizable global icons, most Americans have never heard of this massive structure in their own country's heartland. This omission isn't due to comparative insignificance. Its volume exceeds that of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, often considered the epitome of ancient engineering. The difference lies in how we've valued achievements of different civilizations. European and Mediterranean monuments have been extensively documented and celebrated, while indigenous American achievements have been systematically marginalized or attributed to mythical lost races rather than recognized as Native American accomplishments. The erasure of Monks Mound from popular historical consciousness stems partly from deliberate efforts by early European colonizers to portray Native Americans as primitive peoples incapable of sophisticated engineering or urban planning. This narrative justified land seizure by suggesting the original inhabitants weren't properly using the land. Later, 19th-century American scholars often attributed mounds to vanished non-indigenous peoples, unable to reconcile racist assumptions with the obvious evidence of advanced civilization. Today, archaeological evidence leaves no doubt that Monks Mound and the surrounding city were built by ancestors of modern Native American peoples. The structure stands as a testament to indigenous engineering prowess and challenges us to reconsider whose history we value and whose achievements we celebrate. Woodhenge, ancient America's astronomical observatory. Just beyond the imposing shadow of Monks Mound, archaeologists discovered something that would transform our understanding of Cahokian scientific knowledge. In a clearing west of the central plaza, a pattern of large post holes arranged in a perfect circle emerged from the earth, physical evidence of what scholars now call Woodhenge, an astronomical observatory of remarkable precision built by people often dismissed as technologically unsophisticated. When archaeologist Warren Whittrey first uncovered these post holes in the 1960s, their purpose remained elusive. While excavating near Monks Mound, Whittrey noticed an unusual circular pattern of large pits filled with different soil than their surroundings. These weren't random features, Whittrey later noted in his field journal. Something deliberate was happening here. Each pit once held massive wooden posts, some estimated to be up to 20 feet tall and a foot in diameter. What initially appeared mysterious soon revealed itself as a carefully designed celestial observatory, an ancient clock tower that measured both time and destiny for the people of Cahokia. The most extensively studied Woodhenge, known as Woodhenge III, consisted of 48 posts arranged in a circle approximately 410 feet in diameter. The structure featured precise astronomical alignments. The eastern post aligns perfectly with the sunrise on the equinoxes, while other specifically placed posts mark the sunrise positions on the summer and winter solstices when viewed from the center of the circle. These alignments were remarkably precise. When modern astronomers calculated where these posts would need to be positioned to mark these solar events 1,000 years ago, accounting for the slight changes in Earth's axial tilt over time, the results matched the archaeological evidence with striking accuracy. For Cahokians to achieve this level of astronomical precision, they needed to conduct careful observations over many years, documenting subtle changes in the sun's position. Archaeologists have identified at least 5 different woodhenges constructed at Cahokia over time, each built with slight modifications to the previous design. This suggests an ongoing process of scientific refinement, observations leading to adjustments in the calendar system to improve accuracy. The earliest Woodhenge was built around 900 CE, while the most recent dates to approximately 1100 CE, representing 2 centuries of astronomical observation and scientific development. For an agricultural society like Cahokia, accurate tracking of seasonal changes was crucial for survival. The Woodhenge functioned as both a practical calendar and a ceremonial site, allowing leaders to coordinate planting and harvesting with precision. Imagine the spectacle as the sun rose between specific posts on significant dates, with thousands of Cahokians gathered to witness the alignment that signaled the beginning of spring planting or fall harvest. These solar observations also structured Cahokia's religious ceremonies and political authority. The ability to predict celestial events would have given Cahokian leaders and priests tremendous influence, as they appeared to control cosmic forces through their specialized knowledge. The central observation point where a priest or leader would stand to witness these alignments was elevated on a small platform, physically placing them between earth and sky during these cosmic moments. What makes Cahokia's Woodhenge particularly significant is how it challenges our understanding of scientific knowledge development across cultures. Similar astronomical observatories existed in Europe, most famously Stonehenge in England, yet the Cahokian version receives far less recognition despite comparable precision. While Stonehenge used stone for permanence, Cahokians adapted to their environment by using the abundant timber resources of the Mississippi Valley, creating a structure that served the same scientific purpose through different materials. The circular design of the observatory reflects their cosmological understanding of the universe as layered and circular, with connections between celestial movements and earthly events. This sophisticated approach to timekeeping formed the foundation of their calendar system, which regulated both practical activities and religious ceremonies throughout the year. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Woodhenge was part of a larger ceremonial complex that included nearby mounds and plazas. The central observation point of Woodhenge 3 aligns not only with solar positions but also with key monuments including Monks Mound, creating a sacred landscape where astronomical, political, and religious power converged. This integration of science, spirituality, and governance reveals a worldview where these elements weren't separated as they often are in modern Western thinking. What struck me most, Whitry remarked years after his discovery, was the realization that these people achieved astronomical precision without telescopes or written calculations. It forces us to reconsider what we thought we knew about indigenous scientific capabilities. When European explorers and settlers first encountered the remnants of these sophisticated structures, they refused to believe they had been built by indigenous peoples. Early accounts attributed the mounds and other features to lost civilizations, mysterious races, or even biblical tribes, anything except acknowledging that Native Americans possessed this level of scientific and engineering knowledge. This denial persisted well into the 20th century, despite clear archaeological evidence to the contrary. When Woodhenge is reconstructed today at Cahokia Mound's State Historic Site, visitors can witness the same astronomical alignments that Cahokians observed a millennium ago. Standing at the center of the circle as the sun rises above a marker post during the equinox creates a profound connection across time, a shared human experience of observing celestial patterns that transcends cultural boundaries. Social stratification and governance in Cahokia. While indigenous scientific traditions developed across the Americas, the social structures supporting these achievements were equally sophisticated. Beneath the surface of Cahokia's impressive monuments lies revelatory evidence of a society far more stratified and complex than most historical accounts acknowledge. When archaeologists examined burial sites throughout the region, they discovered stark contrasts that fundamentally challenged simplified views of pre-Columbian societies. Elaborate tombs filled with thousands of prestigious artifacts alongside mass graves containing individuals with virtually no possessions. The most dramatic evidence of Cahokia's social hierarchy comes from Mound 72, where excavations in the 1960s uncovered over 270 burials revealing profound status differences. At the center was the beaded burial, a high-status male estimated to be in his 40s when he died. He was placed on a platform meticulously crafted from approximately 20,000 marine shell beads arranged in the distinctive shape of a falcon or thunderbird, a powerful symbol in indigenous cosmology. This single burial contained more wealth than hundreds of others combined, with the shell beads representing enormous economic value, having been transported from the Gulf Coast hundreds of miles away. The shell-beaded cape required an estimated 1.5 million hours to produce and assemble, representing years of specialized labor. Nearby, archaeologists found the remains of 4 sacrificed individuals, likely attendants meant to accompany this ruler into the afterlife. This practice parallels burial customs found in other complex societies worldwide, from ancient China to Egypt. In sharp contrast, just meters away lay several mass graves containing the remains of young women, likely sacrificed as part of elaborate funerary rituals. Forensic analysis revealed that many had been strangled or suffered blunt force trauma before burial. In another section of the same mound, archaeologists discovered a pit containing the remains of 53 women between the ages of 15 and 25, all evidently sacrificed at the same time. The meticulous arrangement of these bodies suggests carefully orchestrated religious ceremonies reinforcing the extreme power differentials within Cahokian society. Daily life in Cahokia reflected these stark status differences. While an elite resident might start their day in a spacious wall trench house with imported copper ornaments and specialized pottery vessels for ritual feasting, A commoner would wake in a simple single-room dwelling with few possessions beyond basic tools. The elite person would likely consume corn cakes and venison served by attendants, while the common worker subsisted on basic porridge and occasional small game, spending their day laboring on construction projects or producing goods that would ultimately flow upward through Cahokia's social hierarchy. Residential patterns provide further evidence of stratification. Archaeological surveys have identified distinct neighborhoods organized by occupation and social status. Areas closest to Monks Mound and the Grand Plaza contained larger structures with more prestige goods, suggesting elite residential zones. Outlying areas featured smaller dwellings with fewer luxury items. Between these zones were neighborhoods dedicated to specific crafts, areas for shell bead production, pottery making, and stone tool manufacturing, indicating specialized occupational groups. The distribution of exotic goods throughout Cahokia offers another window into social hierarchy. Items made from copper, mica, marine shells, and high-quality chert were concentrated in elite contexts. These materials originated from distant regions, copper from the Great Lakes, marine shells from the Gulf Coast, and mica from the Appalachian Mountains, suggesting elite control of long-distance trade networks. Feasting evidence reveals important social dynamics. Specialized pottery vessels and food remains indicate that certain households hosted large communal meals featuring rare foods like venison and passenger pigeon. These feasting events served as political tools through which elites demonstrated wealth and reinforced status by distributing food to supporters. Religious authority was similarly concentrated among elites. Artifacts associated with the southeastern ceremonial complex, including falcon imagery, ceremonial maces, and human figurines, appear primarily in elite contexts. This suggests that religious knowledge and ritual authority were restricted, with elites serving as intermediaries between the general population and supernatural forces, a hallmark of stratified societies worldwide, where control over cosmic order legitimizes political authority. The mobilization of labor for monumental construction provides compelling evidence of centralized governance. The construction of Monks Mound alone required thousands of workers coordinated over generations. The 50-acre Grand Plaza required earth-moving on a massive scale, with some areas being filled with up to 6 feet of soil. Between 1050 and 1100 CE, Cahokians also built a massive palisade wall around the central precinct, requiring an estimated 20,000 logs from old-growth trees. These projects demonstrate a governing system capable of organizing large workforces and maintaining social cohesion over extended periods. The presence of outlying settlements within Cahokia's sphere of influence suggests a political hierarchy extending beyond the city itself. Satellite communities contained their own mound complexes, but were clearly subordinate to the main center. Food and craft goods flowed from these settlements into Cahokia, suggesting tribute relationships characteristic of early state-level societies. Archaeological evidence suggests that Cahokia's political structure evolved over time. The period before 1050 CE shows less pronounced social differentiation, but the rapid construction of monumental architecture after this date coincides with increased evidence of status differences, possibly representing a shift from a more egalitarian tribal structure to a centralized chiefdom or early state. What makes Cahokia's social complexity particularly significant is how thoroughly it contradicts persistent narratives about indigenous North American societies. Colonial-era accounts later amplified by 19th-century anthropological theories portrayed Native Americans as uniformly simple societies without the capacity for complex political organization. The archaeological evidence from Cahokia reveals instead a society with clear class distinctions, centralized authority, and complex governance systems developing independently from European influences. Colonial narratives conveniently omitted Cahokia's sophistication, but they also missed its most profound lesson. A civilization that once rivaled European cities in size and complexity collapsed so thoroughly that when French explorers arrived in the region centuries later, they found only earthworks with no memory of who built them. a disappearance that may hold urgent warnings for our own society. The decline of Cahokia wasn't sudden but unfolded across 2 centuries. Archaeological evidence reveals that around 1200 CE, this thriving urban center began experiencing significant challenges. By 1350 to 1400 CE, what had been North America's greatest city stood largely abandoned, its plazas empty and its mounds silent. This timeline of gradual dissolution has fueled decades of scientific investigation into how such a remarkable achievement of human organization could dissolve so completely. Several competing theories have emerged to explain Cahokia's downfall, with climate disruption providing some of the most compelling evidence. Paleoclimatologists have analyzed sediment cores from nearby lakes, revealing patterns of environmental instability that coincided precisely with Cahokia's decline. Tree ring data shows severe droughts between 1200 and 1400 CE, including a devastating multi-year drought around 1250 CE that severely impacted agricultural productivity. As the climate shifted, flood patterns in the Mississippi River Valley changed dramatically. Sediment analysis indicates increased flooding frequency and severity, catastrophic for a settlement built on a floodplain. These inundations damaged food storage facilities, homes, and ritual spaces. The unpredictability of these weather patterns, oscillating between drought and flood, made traditional agricultural practices increasingly unreliable. Beyond climate factors, archaeological excavations reveal Cahokians' relationship with their environment had become increasingly unsustainable. Pollen records demonstrate extensive deforestation during Cahokia's peak period. The massive palisade wall required approximately 20,000 logs and was rebuilt at least 4 times. The depletion of old-growth forests led to less desirable tree species becoming dominant over time. This environmental strain transformed into widespread food insecurity. Without tree cover, soil erosion accelerated across the watershed, diminishing agricultural productivity precisely when a large urban population needed reliable food sources. Where once flourished abundant harvests and well-fed people, hunger began to cast its shadow across what had been a prosperous civilization. As resources dwindled, social tensions emerged during Cahokia's later period. The palisade wall surrounding the central precinct served as a practical defensive structure. Initially constructed around 1100 CE, the wall underwent significant expansions during the period of decline. The labor investment suggests that leaders perceived increasing threats, whether from outside groups or internal factions competing for dwindling resources. Human remains tell a poignant story of Cahokia's challenges. Bioarchaeological analysis from the late period shows increasing signs of nutritional stress, with horizontal lines on teeth indicating periods of severe physiological stress during childhood development. Isotope analysis reveals changes in diet composition, with increasing reliance on less nutritious food sources as preferred options became scarcer. Violence increased during the later period. While early Cahokia shows relatively few trauma markers consistent with interpersonal violence, later burials reveal more frequent cranial fractures, defensive wounds, and embedded projectile points. As resources became constrained, conflict increased both within Cahokia and with neighboring groups. The political system also shows signs of strain. Ritual practices changed, with certain ceremonies becoming less elaborate or abandoned entirely. The construction of new mounds slowed significantly, suggesting diminished ability to mobilize labor for monumental projects. The distribution of prestige goods became more restricted, indicating either increased hoarding by elites or disruption of trade networks. Perhaps most telling is the evidence of population movement. Cahokia didn't vanish overnight. Its abandonment followed a pattern of gradual out-migration. Neighborhoods were abandoned sequentially rather than simultaneously, with peripheral areas emptying first. Archaeological signatures of Cahokian cultural practices appear in surrounding regions, suggesting people dispersed in smaller groups rather than relocating as an intact community. These interconnected challenges created a complex system under increasing stress from multiple directions. Climate instability undermined agricultural production, already compromised by environmental degradation. Food insecurity strained social cohesion, potentially undermining political authority. As living conditions deteriorated, people abandoned the urban center for smaller settlements where sustainability might be more achievable. What makes Cahokia's decline particularly relevant today is how it illustrates the vulnerability of complex societies to environmental change. Cahokia represented a remarkable achievement in organizing thousands of people in dense settlement, depending on predictable environmental conditions and careful resource management to sustain itself. When these factors failed, the entire system became increasingly unstable. The puzzle of Cahokia's collapse offers a perspective on sustainability rarely considered in modern environmental discussions. This society represented the height of innovation within its context, yet it demonstrates how successful adaptations have limits when facing multiple, compounding challenges. The question isn't simply whether societies can adapt to changing conditions, but whether they can adapt quickly enough when changes occur across multiple systems simultaneously. More striking still is how completely the memory of Cahokia vanished. Within a few generations, knowledge of this once great metropolis had faded even among indigenous peoples of the region. By the time European explorers arrived in the 17th century, the mounds stood as mysterious monuments with no living memory of their creators or purpose. This cultural amnesia represents perhaps the most profound aspect of Cahokia's collapse, the loss of a city and the knowledge and traditions it embodied. The systematic erasure of indigenous achievement. The systematic erasure of indigenous achievements wasn't accidental. It was methodical and purposeful. When European settlers first documented their encounters with Native American societies, they carried with them weapons and diseases, alongside a cultural lens that determined what they saw and how they recorded it. This lens was tinted with what scholars now recognize as imperial eyes, a way of perceiving indigenous peoples that justified their displacement and subjugation. Consider the journals of early colonists in what would become New England. Despite encountering carefully managed landscapes with cleared fields, cultivated plants, and established settlements, they repeatedly described the land as virgin, untamed, and wilderness awaiting Christian stewardship. These descriptions served the legal doctrine of vacuum domicilium, which held that lands not being used according to European standards were effectively vacant and available for seizure. This perceptual erasure extended beyond land use. European observers frequently misunderstood or deliberately devalued sophisticated indigenous technologies. The complex permaculture systems of the eastern woodlands, which integrated multiple food plants in sustainable polycultures, were dismissed as primitive compared to European monoculture, despite often producing higher yields with less environmental degradation. The erasure deepened in the young American Republic through influential works of early historians. George Bancroft, the father of American history, established a narrative framework in his History of the United States, 1834 to 1874, that effectively relegated indigenous peoples to mere obstacles to progress. His volumes barely acknowledged the complex societies that had flourished for millennia before European arrival, framing America's story as beginning with European discovery. By the mid-19th century, scientific racism provided intellectual justification for this historical erasure. Samuel Morton's Crania Americana, 1839, purported to demonstrate through skull measurements that Native Americans were intellectually inferior to Europeans. His work became foundational to the American School of Anthropology, which held that different human races possessed inherently different capacities for civilization. When faced with evidence contradicting these theories, such as massive earthworks across the Ohio and Mississippi valleys, many scholars developed elaborate alternative explanations. The mound builder myth attributed these sophisticated structures to a vanished non-indigenous civilization, Vikings, Welsh princes, or even Atlantean refugees. Such theories deliberately divested indigenous peoples of their cultural achievements while creating false narratives that shaped public understanding for generations. This historical erasure was institutionalized through education. American history textbooks from the late 19th and early 20th centuries reveal a pattern where Native Americans appeared only at first European contact, during land conflicts, and then vanished, rendered historically irrelevant except as contrasts to European civilization. How many generations grew up never learning about indigenous innovations that had flourished on this continent for millennia? Museums compounded this problem by displaying indigenous artifacts without cultural context, presenting them as curious relics rather than as evidence of sophisticated societies. Collections were often organized according to evolutionary schemas that positioned Native Americans as primitive, regardless of their actual technological achievements. These systematic misrepresentations created the intellectual foundation for policies of removal and land appropriation. The 1823 Supreme Court decision in Johnson v. Mintosh exemplifies how erasure became codified in American law. Chief Justice John Marshall's opinion declared that Native Americans had rights of occupancy, but not sovereignty over their lands because they were fierce savages, whose occupation was war rather than agriculture. This characterization, contradicting abundant evidence of sophisticated farming practices throughout native North America, provided legal justification for continued displacement. The weight of this judicial erasure continues to affect indigenous land rights today. Archaeological evidence contradicting these characterizations was systematically ignored or reinterpreted. Excavations at Cahokia revealed evidence of city planning, astronomical knowledge, and social stratification, yet these findings received little public attention compared to contemporaneous discoveries in Egypt or Mesopotamia. The narrative that complex civilization in the Americas began with European arrival proved too entrenched to dislodge easily. Sometimes the evidence was too overwhelming to deny, yet indigenous achievements were framed as isolated exceptions or attributed to outside influence. Conservation policies in the early 20th century often completed what settlement had begun. National parks like Yellowstone, Yosemite, and Grand Canyon were established on lands with long histories of indigenous habitation and management, yet were presented as pristine wilderness, erasing thousands of years of human influence and expertise. The descendants of those who had shaped these landscapes for generations suddenly became trespassers on their ancestral territories. Modern archaeological techniques have revealed that pre-contact North America was home to far larger populations and more complex societies than previously acknowledged. Yet these findings remain peripheral to mainstream historical consciousness. The image of pre-Columbian America as sparsely populated wilderness persists, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Most significantly, this erasure has deprived contemporary Americans of knowledge about sustainable practices developed over thousands of years on this continent. Agricultural techniques like the Three Sisters polyculture, growing corn, beans, and squash together, offered solutions to problems of soil fertility and pest management that modern industrial agriculture still struggles with. Urban planning principles from ancient sites like Cahokia demonstrated methods for accommodating large populations while managing flood risks that remain relevant to modern river cities. By acknowledging the systematic nature of this historical erasure, we can begin to recover not just a more accurate understanding of the past, but also valuable knowledge for addressing present challenges. The architectural, agricultural, and governmental innovations of indigenous North America weren't just historical curiosities. They represent millennia of practical problem-solving adapted to the specific environments of this continent. Tiwanaku, the Andean engineering marvel. While indigenous engineering in North America has been overlooked, South America holds equally astonishing achievements that challenge our understanding of ancient technology. High in the Bolivian Andes sits Tiwanaku, an architectural wonder that forces us to reconsider what was possible without modern tools. This city flourished between 500–1000 CE at an elevation of 12,500 feet above sea level, an environment so challenging that even modern construction equipment struggles to operate efficiently in the thin air. The location itself presents the first engineering puzzle. Lake Titicaca's shores, where Tiwanaku was built, experience freezing temperatures at night, intense solar radiation during the day, and oxygen levels approximately 40% lower than at sea level. These conditions make physical labor extraordinarily difficult. Yet the ancient Tiwanakans constructed a metropolis spanning over 4 square miles that housed an estimated 20,000 residents at its peak. The city's most impressive features are its precisely cut stone structures. The Okapana Pyramid, a massive stepped platform measuring over 650 feet on each side and rising 50 feet high, was built using andesite and sandstone blocks weighing several tons each. These stones fit together with precision comparable to modern laser-guided cutting systems, creating seams so tight that not even a razor blade can be inserted between them. The technological mystery deepens when we consider the tools available. Tiwanaku's stoneworkers had no iron or steel, only copper, bronze, and stone implements. Metallurgical analysis of copper tools found at the site shows they would have been too soft to cut the hard andesite used in construction. Experimental archaeology suggests they likely used a combination of techniques, repeatedly pounding the stone with harder stone hammers, using abrasive sand with water to slowly grind surfaces, and potentially employing organic acids from local plants to soften certain minerals in the rock. The Gateway of the Sun exemplifies Tiwanaku's stone-cutting mastery. This monolithic arch stands nearly 10 feet tall and 13 feet wide, carved from a single block of andesite weighing over 10 tons. Its surface features intricate relief carvings of 48 winged figures surrounding a central deity known as the staff god. Astronomical analysis reveals these figures likely represent a 48-day calendrical cycle used to track agricultural seasons critical for farming at this extreme altitude. The gateway's carved figures maintain consistent proportions and symmetry across the entire surface, with deviations of less than a millimeter, a level of precision that would challenge modern stone carvers using power tools. The knowledge required to create such an artifact points to sophisticated understanding of geometry and measurement systems. Perhaps even more impressive are the H-blocks found throughout the site. These massive stones feature perfectly cut interior angles and complex interlocking shapes that create virtually earthquake-proof structures. When Peru's National University of Engineering conducted computer simulations of these structures, they found the design effectively disperses seismic energy, crucial in this tectonically active region. The block's configurations represent an elegant engineering solution developed millennia before modern seismic construction techniques. The transportation challenge compounds the mystery. Many of the largest stones at Tiwanaku were quarried from sites over 40 miles away. The Pumapunku complex features andesite blocks weighing up to 130 tons and sandstone blocks weighing 80 tons that were transported across mountain terrain and water. Archaeologist Alexei Vraynik has conducted experiments suggesting these massive stones may have been moved using wooden rollers on prepared clay roads, with teams of hundreds pulling in coordinated efforts. Some evidence suggests Tiwanakans may have waited for seasonal flooding, floating the massive stones on rafts across Lake Titicaca. The Pumapunku's largest platform block measures 26 feet long, 16 feet wide, and weighs approximately 130 tons. Its surface is perfectly level, with precise 90-degree cuts along its edges. Engineering analysis by Italian researcher Lorenzo Aiello revealed that achieving this level of flatness across such a large stone surface would require understanding of plane geometry that wasn't documented in Europe until over 500 years later, demonstrating the advanced mathematical knowledge developed by indigenous engineers. The eye-shaped architectural clamps that once held many of Tiwanaku's structures together demonstrate metallurgical sophistication. Analysis shows they were made of an arsenical bronze alloy, specifically formulated to resist the extreme temperature fluctuations at this altitude. The expansion and contraction properties of this particular alloy perfectly complemented the stone's own thermal behavior, preventing cracks from developing during freezing nights and hot days. Beyond technical achievement, Tiwanaku's architecture incorporated profound astronomical alignments. The Kalasasaya temple complex, a semi-subterranean rectangular structure with precisely placed stone pillars along its perimeter, functions as a massive solar calendar. On the equinoxes, the sun rises and sets in perfect alignment with specific pillars. During solstices, other alignments mark the sun's position with accuracy that Swedish archaeoastronomer Maria Scholten describes as comparable to European observatories built thousands of years later. These engineering feats become even more remarkable considering they were accomplished in an environment where basic survival is challenging. At 12,500 feet, water boils at a lower temperature, making cooking difficult. The thin air makes fires burn differently, complicating metallurgy. The agricultural growing season is abbreviated by frost risks. Yet the indigenous engineers of Tiwanaku overcame these obstacles through ingenuity and deep environmental knowledge. Modern archaeological techniques are finally revealing Tiwanaku's true technological sophistication. Using ground-penetrating radar, archaeologists have mapped extensive underground water management systems that controlled Lake Titicaca's seasonal flooding, infrastructure that archaeological engineer Christine Hastorf describes as more sophisticated than what Rome had achieved during the same period. These hydraulic works facilitated raised field agriculture that supported the city's large population in an otherwise challenging environment, showcasing indigenous innovation that deserves recognition alongside other great ancient engineering traditions. Raised field agriculture, Tiwanaku's climate-resilient innovation. The hydraulic infrastructure beneath Tiwanaku's monuments reveals only half the remarkable story. Above this foundation lay an agricultural system so ingenious that it produced food yields up to 400% higher than modern farming achieves in the same region today. These raised fields, locally known as sucacolos, transformed a seemingly inhospitable environment into one of ancient America's most productive agricultural centers. What makes this achievement truly extraordinary is the extreme hostility of the Andean altiplano to conventional agriculture. At 12,500 feet elevation, the region experiences more than 200 nights of frost annually. Temperatures can plummet from 60 degrees Fahrenheit during the day to well below freezing at night, temperature swings that damage or kill most common crops. The thin, nutrient-poor soils further compound these challenges, as does the region's unpredictable precipitation pattern, which alternates between seasonal flooding and extended periods of drought. The altiplano's atmospheric conditions present additional barriers. With oxygen levels approximately 40% lower than at sea level, physical labor becomes significantly more taxing. The intense solar radiation at high altitudes can quickly dehydrate plants, while strong winds accelerate moisture loss from soil. Modern agronomists consider this environment so challenging that many agricultural development projects have failed here despite access to contemporary technology and scientific knowledge. Yet Tiwanaku engineers developed an elegant solution that worked with, rather than against, these environmental extremes. Their raised field system consisted of elevated soil platforms surrounded by a grid of water-filled canals. These platforms typically measured between 4 to 10 meters wide and 10 to 100 meters long, rising 1 to 2 meters above the surrounding terrain. The precise dimensions were calibrated to specific local conditions, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of microclimate management. The genius of this system lay in its thermal regulation properties. During the day, the water in the canals absorbed solar radiation, then gradually released this heat during the night, creating a microclimate that protected crops from killing frosts. Agricultural archaeologist Clark Erickson documented temperature differences of up to 7 degrees Celsius between raised fields and surrounding areas during freezing nights, enough to protect even sensitive crops like potatoes from damage. These canals served multiple functions beyond frost protection. They provided consistent irrigation during dry periods by maintaining elevated groundwater levels beneath the platforms while preventing waterlogging during rainy seasons by channeling excess precipitation away from root systems. This hydraulic flexibility effectively solved both drought and flooding challenges simultaneously. The canals functioned as nutrient recycling systems. Sediments rich in nitrogen and phosphorus accumulated in these waterways, which Tiwanaku farmers periodically dredged to replenish and enrich the soil of the raised platforms. The canals also supported aquatic plants and algae that fixed atmospheric nitrogen, effectively creating a self-sustaining fertilizer production system. Agricultural ecologist Alan Kalata, who led reconstruction experiments of Tiwanaku's raised fields in the 1980s, observed, "The Sukakolo system actively improved soil fertility over time, something our modern agricultural systems rarely achieve." This regenerative quality stands in stark contrast to conventional farming, which typically depletes soil nutrients and requires continuous external inputs. The archaeological evidence reveals the system's remarkable productivity. Pollen analysis and macrobotanical remains indicate that Tiwanaku farmers cultivated a diverse array of crops in these fields, including multiple varieties of potatoes, quinoa, amaranth, and other Andean grains. Carbon dating of plant remains demonstrates that some fields produce 2 or even 3 harvests annually, an extraordinary achievement in a region where modern farmers struggle to secure a single reliable harvest each year. The scale of this agricultural innovation was equally impressive. Satellite imagery and remote sensing have identified over 80,000 hectares of ancient raised fields in the Lake Titicaca Basin. This massive agricultural infrastructure required careful coordination of labor and resources, suggesting sophisticated social organization and long-term planning. Hydraulic archaeologist Charles Ortloff estimates that constructing this system required tens of millions of person-hours, a testament to Tiwanaku's commitment to agricultural sustainability. This agricultural system generated substantial surpluses that fueled Tiwanaku's urban development and political expansion. Archaeological evidence from storage facilities in the city center suggests food reserves sufficient to sustain the population through multiple years of adverse conditions. This food security created political stability and freed portions of the population to specialize in craft production, religious activities, and administration. The raised field system fundamentally challenges conventional narratives about technological development. Environmental archaeologist Christine Hastorf notes, Tiwanaku developed a farming system perfectly adapted to local conditions without metal tools or draft animals, a powerful reminder that technological sophistication doesn't always follow the paths we assume. This agricultural innovation represents an elegant engineering solution precisely tailored to a specific environment. In the 1990s, Indigenous farmer Miguel Huanca participated in a raised field reconstruction project near Lake Titicaca. "When we first rebuilt the ancient fields, many neighbors laughed," he recalls. "But during the drought of 1997, their modern crops failed while our potatoes thrived. Now several families have adopted these methods, combining ancestral knowledge with select modern tools." His plot continues to produce 3 to 4 times more potatoes than neighboring conventional fields, while using 60% less chemical fertilizer and requiring only minimal irrigation during dry periods. This practical success demonstrates the system's contemporary relevance. While modern industrial agriculture consumes fossil fuels, depletes aquifers, and contributes to soil degradation, reconstructed raised fields actually sequester carbon, conserve water, and build soil health over time. Recent climate models suggest the Altiplano will face increasingly erratic precipitation patterns, precisely the conditions these ancient systems were designed to manage. Despite this demonstrated effectiveness, modern development agencies initially dismissed these indigenous technologies as primitive and continued promoting inappropriate European-derived agricultural methods. Only recently have some agricultural organizations begun incorporating principles from these ancient systems into climate adaptation strategies for Andean communities facing increasing environmental instability. As global agriculture confronts the challenges of climate change, Tiwanaku's ingenious raised fields offer valuable lessons continental in influence, regenerative and trade food production. The agricultural genius of Tiwanaku represents just one facet of their sophisticated adaptation to the Andean landscape. Even more puzzling to archaeologists is the discovery of Tiwanaku artifacts and architectural elements at sites separated by thousands of miles, desert barriers, and towering mountain ranges. A continental footprint achieved without any of the transportation or communication technologies we typically associate with empire building. When archaeologists first began studying Tiwanaku in the early 20th century, they viewed it primarily as an isolated ceremonial center. The prevailing assumption was that high altitude, harsh climate, and challenging terrain would naturally limit the civilization's reach. This perspective changed dramatically in the 1960s and 70s when researchers began identifying unmistakable Tiwanaku ceramics, textiles, and architectural features at sites hundreds of miles from the capital. Archaeological evidence now confirms Tiwanaku's influence extended from the Pacific coast of southern Peru to northern Chile and northwest Argentina, a territorial expanse covering over 600,000 square kilometers and encompassing some of Earth's most extreme environments. This vast sphere of influence crossed formidable natural barriers including the Atacama Desert, the driest non-polar desert on Earth, and multiple Andean mountain ranges with passes exceeding 15,000 feet in elevation. What makes this continental reach particularly remarkable is Tiwanaku's adaptation to vertical ecology, a strategic approach to colonization unlike anything seen in Europe or Asia. Rather than expanding outward in concentric circles as many imperial powers did, Tiwanaku established satellite communities in different ecological zones at varying elevations. This created what archaeologist Alan Kalata describes as a vertical archipelago. Imagine a series of ecological stepping stones stacked up the mountainside, with each elevation providing distinct resources and advantages. Through this system, the civilization maintained control over ecological islands throughout the Andes. These colonies served specific ecological functions, each providing resources unavailable in the Altiplano. Coastal settlements supplied marine resources like fish and seabird guano for fertilizer. Mid-elevation valleys provided coca and tropical fruits. Lower mountain valleys offered prime agricultural land for maize cultivation. The highest zones above 14,000 feet provided access to camelid herding grounds and valuable mineral deposits. The movement of goods throughout this extensive network presented enormous logistical challenges. Without wheels or draft animals capable of traversing mountain terrain, Tiwanaku established an elaborate llama caravan system. These caravans, comprised of hundreds of animals, could transport goods over 20 to 30 kilometers per day across challenging mountain terrain. Llama trains were particularly suited to Andean conditions. They require little water, can navigate narrow mountain trails, and carry loads of up to 40 kilograms for weeks at a time. Excavations at the Tiwanaku colony of Omo in southern Peru reveal how the imperial presence manifested in distant regions. The site features distinctive Tiwanaku-style temples and plazas alongside local architectural forms, suggesting a strategic cultural integration rather than conquest. Similarly, at Moquegua Valley sites, archaeologists have uncovered thousands of ceramic vessels with iconography identical to those in the capital, indicating strong cultural connections maintained across vast distances. This distributed settlement pattern created a resilient economic system that archaeologist Christine Hastorf calls a revolutionary adaptation to Andean environmental diversity. Unlike European imperial models that depended on tributary relationships with conquered peoples, Tiwanaku's approach integrated diverse ecological zones into a single economic system bound together by religious and cultural ties. The trade network moved an extraordinary range of goods. Among the most striking examples were colorful feathers from Amazonian birds, found in elite burials throughout Tiwanaku territory. These iridescent blue, red, and yellow plumes required traveling over 300 kilometers from the Altiplano into completely different ecological zones. Similarly, obsidian from quarries 400 kilometers away was crafted into tools and ceremonial objects, demonstrating the extensive reach of Tiwanaku's influence. The economic network was reinforced through religious symbolism that transcended language barriers. The staff guard, a central figure in Tiwanaku iconography depicted on the Gateway of the Sun, appears in modified forms throughout the central Andes during this period. Archaeologist William Isbell suggests this represents a deliberate religious diffusion strategy, creating a shared cosmological framework across diverse cultural groups. Religious pilgrimages to Tiwanaku further strengthened these connections. Archaeological evidence indicates that thousands regularly traveled to the capital for ceremonies, bringing offerings from their home regions and returning with ritual objects bearing Tiwanaku symbolism. These pilgrimages created personal relationships across vast distances and reinforced the prestige of the capital's religious institutions. What's particularly fascinating is how Tiwanaku maintained this sphere of influence without key technologies historically associated with empire building. They had no writing system to transmit standardized orders across distances. They lacked horses or wheeled vehicles for rapid transportation. They possessed no metallurgy capable of producing the kinds of weapons that enabled military dominance in otherworld regions. Instead, Tiwanaku's imperial strategy relied on what anthropologist John Janasek calls ideological infrastructure, a combination of shared religious beliefs, strategic resource control, and cultural prestige that bound diverse populations together without overt military conquest. This approach created a more flexible imperial system that could adapt to regional conditions while maintaining the economic benefits of a continental network. This pattern of influence raises intriguing questions about connections between distant American civilizations. While direct contact between Tiwanaku and Cahokia seems unlikely given the enormous distances and geographical barriers involved, their parallel developments in astronomy, urban planning, and agricultural innovation suggest the possibility of indirect knowledge sharing through extended trade routes. Researcher Tom Dillahay has identified evidence of trade connections spanning thousands of miles along the Andean coast, raising the possibility that ideas and technologies might have traveled even further through intermediate cultural groups. Could fragments of Tiwanaku's astronomical knowledge or organizational strategies have eventually reached North American societies through such extended networks? While speculative, the question invites us to consider pre-Columbian America as a complex tapestry of interconnected cultural spheres rather than isolated civilizations. Rewriting history. Recognizing indigenous achievement. The tapestry of pre-Columbian America reveals a fundamental question about how we construct historical narratives. If sophisticated civilizations that housed tens of thousands and engineered environmental solutions across continental scale networks have been effectively erased from common knowledge, what does this tell us about whose achievements our educational systems value? In recent decades, a quiet revolution has been unfolding across academic disciplines and indigenous communities alike. Archaeologists, historians, and native scholars are collaboratively reshaping our understanding of the American past through methodical recovery and reinterpretation of indigenous achievements. This work represents a profound recalibration of historical perspective with implications for how we understand human development globally. Modern technologies have dramatically accelerated this process of historical recovery. LiDAR scanning has revealed the true scale of pre-Columbian settlements previously hidden beneath forest canopies. In the Amazon basin, these techniques have uncovered vast networks of settlements that housed millions more people than previously thought possible. Archaeologist Michael Heckenberger explains, "These weren't just scattered villages. We're looking at a fully urbanized Amazonian landscape with monumental earthworks that rivaled anything in Europe during the same period." This pattern of discovery continues throughout the Americas. In Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, LiDAR has revealed approximately 60,000 previously unknown Maya structures. In Honduras, the Ciudad Blanca complex demonstrates how much remains to be discovered. Our understanding of indigenous achievement remains in its infancy despite centuries of archaeological work. Indigenous communities themselves have become central to this historical reclamation. The Native American Languages Act of 1990 created frameworks for indigenous knowledge preservation. Tribal historic preservation offices now manage archaeological resources on sovereign lands, ensuring that indigenous perspectives guide research priorities. This shift fundamentally alters how knowledge about the past is constructed. According to cultural heritage partners, over 200 tribal historic preservation offices now operate across the United States, compared to just 12 in 1990. These offices actively integrate traditional knowledge with contemporary scientific methods. At Cahokia, the Osage Nation has been integral to reinterpreting the site's significance. Similarly, Aymara and Quechua communities participate in archaeological work at Tiwanaku, contributing insights unavailable through conventional academic approaches. Educational systems are gradually incorporating these expanded historical narratives. Montana's Indian Education for All initiative requires students to learn about tribal nations and their contributions. Similar programs have emerged in Washington, Oregon, and other states. The Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian has developed resources challenging traditional narratives about indigenous societies. Have you ever wondered what else your history textbooks might have overlooked? These revisions are fundamentally restructuring our understanding of human development. The conventional progression from hunter-gatherer to agricultural to industrial societies has privileged European developmental paths. When we recognize that societies like Cahokia and Tiwanaku developed complex urban centers without many technologies considered necessary for civilization, we must reconsider our assumptions about societal development. Anthropologist David Graeber challenges these assumptions. The standard narrative suggests that societies inevitably progress through specific technological stages in a linear fashion. The archaeological record simply doesn't support this. Indigenous American societies often made deliberate choices about which technologies to adopt based on social and environmental considerations. The environmental relevance of this historical reframing is immediate. The raised field agriculture of Tiwanaku has demonstrated practical applications for contemporary Andean farmers. The Three Sisters polyculture system offers solutions to soil depletion. The Amazon's terra preta soils, created through indigenous carbon sequestration, provide insights into carbon capture technologies urgently needed today. Environmental engineer Hayden Campbell notes, "What we're discovering is that many indigenous agricultural practices actively regenerated ecological systems while increasing productivity. This stands in stark contrast to many modern agricultural approaches that deplete resources for short-term gain. These insights extend beyond agriculture." Cahokia's urban planning utilized natural water management systems that mitigated flooding while creating productive wetlands. Southwestern Puebloan communities developed passive solar techniques that maintained comfortable indoor temperatures without external energy inputs. Pacific Northwest peoples managed salmon populations through conservation practices that maintained abundance for thousands of years. The recovery of indigenous achievement invites us to reconsider assumptions about social organization. Many indigenous societies developed political systems that balanced centralized coordination with local autonomy. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy's constitutional democracy influenced American governmental structures while maintaining distinctive approaches to consensus building and women's political participation. Political scientist Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz observes that recovering indigenous political systems isn't just about historical accuracy. It expands our imagination about possible forms of social organization in the present. Historical erasure constrains our ability to envision alternative futures. Much remains unknown. For every Cahokia or Tiwanaku that has received significant archaeological attention, dozens of major indigenous centers remain understudied. Archaeologist Sarah Parkak estimates that less than 10% of potential archaeological sites in the Americas have been properly documented, let alone excavated. our current understanding represents only the beginning of a much larger process of historical recovery. Reintegrating indigenous achievement into historical narratives requires reconceptualizing human development globally. It challenges us to recognize multiple centers of innovation across the Americas, with indigenous civilizations making sophisticated contributions to human knowledge. When we place Cahokia alongside medieval Paris, when we consider Tiwanaku's agricultural innovations as sophisticated as Roman engineering, we construct a more accurate picture of global human achievement. This expanded view contextualizes European contributions within a complex tapestry of human ingenuity. Perhaps it's time for our educational systems to reflect this richer, more inclusive understanding of our shared past. As we've traced the remarkable achievements of Cahokia and Tiwanaku, the question remains: why were these sophisticated civilizations effectively removed from our historical consciousness? This erasure was systematic, part of a broader pattern that determined which human accomplishments deserved recognition. Today, we can correct this historical imbalance. These forgotten metropolises enrich our understanding of humanity's shared heritage, offering valuable lessons in sustainability and community organization for our modern challenges. Could these rediscovered cities guide our future path? Their legacy stands as testament to human brilliance across the Americas, creating a historical tapestry far more diverse